Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this webinar series is designed because I have decided that in 2016, my goal for ACT users is to try to help them learn as much as possible about ACT software. I think it's good for our industry if people understand how this works, because the better educated you are, the more likely you are to work with someone like myself or any ACT consultant, and frankly, to keep you with the ACT software for years to come. And I think the more you can get out of it, the better off we all are as far as using ACT. So I've tried to go through some of the things that I commonly talk to my clients about, and one of the things that I always end up addressing is the best way to go about using email. And with email, I find there's a lot of little things that you need to know about to make the most out of ACT. And one of those things is quite simply trying to figure out, okay, how do I work with ACT in email? Because you have a lot of options. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through some of these options and try to discuss them with you and give you some ideas for how you can do more with email. So the first thing I want to just remind you is, as a software teacher, I'm the owner of the website, tonytheteacher.com. That's where you can find me. Also, I have a website, 365 ACT Tips, which is loaded with ACT software tips, and I try to give you insights. I try to put things up there on a weekly basis. Teach an Old Dog New Tricks is also my website, and that has about 80 hours of computer training videos on things that we all use as computer users and ACT users. That includes Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, Microsoft Word, and much more. There's also some training videos up there on QuickBooks as well. So if you use all this stuff, that is going to be a helpful website. It's all free. There's no registration. You can just go there. Again, it's Teach an Old Dog New Tricks. And also, as a web designer, some of the things that I will try to mention today are related to web design to a certain degree. And if you know a little bit about that, that's going to help you when it comes to email. As always, if you haven't taken advantage of this, please reach out to me. I give every ACT user an hour of my time for free if they need it. You can call me with any questions about ACT, daily use, hourly, or technical questions, anything related to ACT. Feel free to take me up on this offer. So as far as it comes to emailing from ACT, I find that a lot of people do this the hard way. And let me tell you what I mean. The whole concept of emailing from ACT is this. When you're on the ACT screen, if you have taken the time to fill out the email address in ACT, then all you have to do is simply click on the email address down on where the bottom left-hand arrow is pointing. All you have to do is click on that email address, and what it will do is one of two things typically. One, it's going to open up ACT's email program. Now, ACT has a built-in email program which no one I know ever uses, because frankly, there's things that are just not that great about it. So technically, can you set up ACT to use its own email program? Absolutely, positively. But what most of you will do is use Microsoft Outlook to send an email. So when you click on the email address down on the bottom left, it will actually open up Outlook if it's not already open, and it will populate the email address in Outlook with the email address that you see right there. Now, just a little caveat on that. When you look at your own record in ACT, it's called the My Record. This is the My Record in this particular database. For some reason, when you click on your own email address, it will open up Microsoft Outlook, but it will not populate your email address. Now, why it's designed that way, I've never known. I never understood that. So if you're going to test that, test it on any other contact except your own, except the My Record. Second, up in the top right-hand corner, you can click on the email icon, and that will do the exact same thing. When you click on the email address down on the bottom left-hand side, when you put your pointer on that, if you hover your pointer over it and you leave it there for more than what seems like just a split second, it goes from being a pointer into a very skinny capital I. And when you click, instead of sending the email, what it does is it thinks you're trying to edit the email, and what it will do is sort of click right on the spot where you clicked, thinking you're actually trying to edit it. So when you click on the actual written out email address, you got to be sort of quick about it. Up in the top right-hand corner to send an email, quite honestly, it's just bigger and it's a little bit easier to click on that and send it. So typically, when you're going to send an email to an individual, you look them up in ACT, you either click on one of these two spots and you send an email. That's pretty clear cut. But what happens when you want to send an email to more than one person? This is where ACT starts to get a little bit tricky. And on that note, it gets tricky because you have some options. So what I find a lot of people are thinking about is this. When you're sending an email, a lot of my ACT clients have actually set up email programs or email campaigns through companies that provide email services. And probably one of the most popular ones that I see that people use, and one that people know the best, is Constant Contact. Now, there's another one that's becoming more popular, and that's called MailChimp. ACT has two tools as of right now, 2016, that are built right into ACT. Both of the tools you have to subscribe to a certain extent. The first one is up in the top left-hand corner, and that's called SwiftPage. The second one over on the right-hand side on the computer screen is ACT Email Marketing, and I'm going to talk about these in a little more detail later on. The primary difference between these is this. The two ACT versions work directly right inside of ACT. Constant Contact in MailChimp, one of the dilemmas you face is you've got to take your contact information from ACT, you have to export it out of ACT, and then upload it into either Constant Contact or MailChimp. Now, I think there's some pros and cons of every one of these scenarios, every one of these options, and I'm going to discuss that a little bit later and get into just a little bit more detail. But this is primarily what people are thinking about when they're trying to send emails to more than one person. Now, when I say more than one person, let's say it's not a big email. Let's say we're not talking hundreds of people. Let's say we're just talking 3 or 4 people or maybe 10 people. Well, there's other ways you can do this that are easier, and believe it or not, they're rather simple, and I find a lot of ACT users don't even know about it. So let me move on. When I talk about emailing, I talk about email marketing versus emailing directly from ACT. You'd use a Constant Contact for email marketing. You'd use a MailChimp or SwiftPage email for email marketing. But when you're emailing directly from ACT, you're sort of emailing from a list. And that list can be a simple list. Let's say you look up all the people at the ABC company in your ACT database, and let's say there's 10 of them, and you want to send all 10 of those people a quick email. Well, believe it or not, it's awkward at best to do that from ACT. And a lot of people don't know how to go about that. So let me show you how that happens. So there's a couple things you want to think about as you do this. And when you think about these things by sending an email to multiple people, even though I just said we're only going to send it to 10 people, well, let's say you want to send it to 100 people. Okay? Well, when you send an email, you have to be aware of this. So let me backtrack for just a minute and talk about just a simple way to email from a list. And to do that, I'm going to simply navigate out of the PowerPoint presentation I have and show you ACT. So this is our ACT database, just our sample database. And I have a bunch of contacts here. So let's say I just go up and go look up and I go all contacts. It's a small database. Well, when you have a list of people, and let's assume, and trust me when I tell you, most of these except the first two, which I'm just going to get out of the way, most of these have email addresses. So if I said to you, how do you email the first 5 people? Well, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the first email contact, this one right here. Next, if I want to send an email to, say, the first 5 or 6, I'm going to hold the Shift key down in ACT, and I'm going to click on the last one that I want to send it to. And what happened here is it selected or highlighted all of these individuals. Okay? So this is how you send an email to multiple people from a list like this. You go up and you simply click on the email. What it's going to do, it's going to open up Microsoft Outlook and it's going to take all their email addresses and throw it into the to field. Now, when you send an email out, you don't want to send all those people an email from you with all their email addresses in the to field. This is vital. You never want to do that because then they're going to see everyone else that got the email. I always love telling the story about a client who received an email and it was a request for a price on some equipment. But what happened was the people that sent it to my client actually sent it to 14 other people. And my client knew that because all those 14 other email addresses were in the to field. If they had done it the right way, what they would have done is they would have taken all these email addresses and put it in the blind carbon copy field right there. So to do that, there's a couple ways I can do this, and I'll show you this. First, you always want to make sure you move this to the blind carbon copy field, because that way people on the other end are not going to know that you've sent it to multiple people. So what we have to do is we've got to come up here and we've got to select all these email addresses and get them out of there and move them to blind carbon copy. So I'll show you how I would do this. I'm going to click once up here anywhere in the to field, and I'm just going to select and drag and highlight all those. Then I'm going to sort of let go. Next, I'm going to go back, and with my pointer, I'm going to click anywhere on the blue highlighted section. It could be way over here to the right or over here. Click and hold and don't let go. Next, grab all that information and just drag it down to blind carbon copy. That's one way. Let's reverse that. Let's say that I want to move it up to the to field. Well, the keyboard shortcut to select all is Control. I'm going to hold the Control key down and press the letter A. I selected all those email addresses. Another way I could do it is instead of clicking on it and dragging it up with my mouse, I could just go Control X to cut it out of there. And then to paste it back in the to field, I could do Control V as in Victor. Control C is copy, Control X is cut, Control V as in Victor is paste. So if you know those keyboard shortcuts, you can do that. So now what happens is I'm just going to drag them down to blind carbon copy. And at this point, I can just fill in the subject, fill in the body, hit send, and I'm done. But what ACT does is this. When you're sending emails from ACT through Outlook, there's a very important thing that it does in ACT. It updates the last email field, which you see right here. So that last email field gets updated with today's date. And I'm going to show you that again in a little more detail in a couple seconds. So next, what I want to do is I want to just get you back to the slideshow. Bear with me a second. There we go. So when you're emailing from a list, it's not that hard to do if you're using the ACT list. The first thing you have to do is do your lookup of contacts and then select the people you want to send it to and click on the email icon in ACT and you're on your way. So as you're sending emails, the potential exists that although I just showed you how to send 5 or 6 emails, you could potentially send 100 emails. But what you need to think about is this. You need to know a little bit about your email service provider. You need to know what their limitations are on sending things from ACT. I'm sorry, I misspoke. From sending things out through their email. Because a lot of times they don't like you, for example, to send 100 blind carbon copy emails. Even though technically you could do it, they don't necessarily like you to do that. They might place limits on how many emails you can send blind carbon copy. They might consider it spam. So be careful with that. Also, I try to tell my clients, don't over email your clients because you don't want to sort of surpass their email threshold. So be careful about the amount you send email to. So the next thing you can do is this. I don't know in ACT if you've ever done a mail merge. Well, a mail merge is this. Let's say you write a sales letter, a form letter. If you do a lookup of, say, 100 contacts in ACT, you can do that by creating a mail merge to all those people that you did the lookup for. So let me illustrate that for you. Bear with me a second. Again, I have 162 people here in the lookup. I'm going to go look up again and go all contacts just so you can see them. Let's assume for a minute that I've already written the letter. Well, what I can do next is if I go up to write and I go down not to letter, but if I go down to mail merge and click on that, a mail merge wizard will come up in Act. This mail merge wizard will take you through the steps you need to do. But this is the key step right here. When you do a mail merge, typically we're used to printing out form letters on your printer. But what ACT will allow you to do is instead of sending it to the printer, you're going to send it out via email. So I could literally send an email out to all 164 of these contacts, but what it does is instead of sending out one email with 164 in the blind carbon copy, it actually sends out 164 individual emails. It will process it and send it out through Microsoft Outlook. So mail merges are a really great way of getting a quick message out there to a lot of people quickly. And generally because all the emails are going out in the to field and they're individual emails, generally your email service provider, whoever that might be, will not object as greatly to you doing it this way. Again, it's something you've got to be aware of and you've got to test. So let me just click on next. At this point, you would browse to the email you want to send. And I'm just going to click anything right there. And again, you would have done this in advance. Click next. It's going to ask you who do you want to send it to. In this case, I'd say the current lookup. I'm going to go next. You can put a subject in for the email. You can also tell ACT, hey, you know what, how do I want to record this? I always recommend record the email subject and message. If I click next, what it will do is I'm almost there to the point where I would send these, and I'm not going to do that. But this is a real great option for sending email, and frankly, this doesn't cost you anything. You're already paying for your email program. This is no issue to do this. What I usually recommend is start with small batches, maybe send 25, and then the next time you do it, send 50. And just see if you run into any issues, or else reach out to your email service provider to see what their limitations are, what their policies are. So let me backtrack for just a moment. I'm going to next go back, and I told you I want to talk about some of the other providers you can use. When you try to send an email out through these providers like SwiftPage, Constant Contact, MailChimp, and Act Email Marketing, they all, in my opinion, have their strengths and weaknesses. Probably the best part about Constant Contact is this. In Constant Contact, my experience has been as far as creating and sending an email, once you have all your email addresses uploaded, it's probably the easiest tool to work with. A lot of the things you do with it, you don't have to have a ton of computer skills to be able to use that. MailChimp is a little bit more difficult, but it's not too bad. Again, what I always tell people, when you use these pieces of software, don't think of them in terms of it's ACT. Don't think of them in terms of, it's related to ACT even. Think of them in terms of it is a completely different piece of software and I have to learn it. And I think if you approach it from that point of view, you'll be less frustrated with it. Because it's a brand new piece of software and you have to go in and learn how to work with it. When you create a template for your email, you need to know a little bit about text, you need to know about hyperlinks, you need to know about getting everything exactly the way you want it, you need to know about working with images, and some tools are easier to work with than others. SwiftPage, just to clarify something, SwiftPage today is the owner of ACT Software. Back quite a few years, I don't know, maybe about 3 years ago, SwiftPage made a tool called SwiftPage Email. It was a product that worked directly through ACT. It was unrelated to ACT. They were a completely separate company that you could set up an email program. The way I always describe SwiftPage is it's like Constant Contact, but it works directly in ACT. SwiftPage allows you to import all the results of the emails you send out right back into the contacts within ACT. ACT Email Marketing is the new iteration of the email program. It is a good program. I think it does some things great, but if you've had experience using SwiftPage, I think you're going to find there are subtle differences, and it's comparing apples and oranges. If you're used to SwiftPage email, and then you move over to Active Email Marketing, as I did, you're going to notice there are some things it doesn't do as well, and there's some things it does a lot better. You can actually still use either one. The main reason I would recommend the Active Email Marketing program today is because the email can be designed to be what is called responsive. Responsive emails adapt to the type of device that people read them on. SwiftPage really doesn't do that. It sort of works, it's okay, but it's not the newest technology. Meaning, I want to be able to see the email clearly if I read it on my computer screen, and I also want to be able to see it clearly and concisely and understand it if I read it on my iPhone. So most of these software programs have adapted to the fact that we are reading things and looking at things on different kinds of screens. As I always tell my clients, at the end of the day, we put a lot of time and energy into sending email. We work very hard to do that. And in my opinion, you've got to keep it in perspective, because at best, for most of us, when we send an email out, on average, 25% of the people that get it or less are going to open it. Because of that fact, in my opinion, the most important field when you're sending an email is the subject line field. The reason ACT and email and the way you set it up is so vital is because, in my opinion, the second most important field in ACT is the last email field. Why is that? Well, let's face it, in this day and age, a lot of ACT users are small business people. They don't have a lot of time on their hands. And one of the ways we communicate with prospects and clients is via email. The last thing let me rephrase that. Let me start again. The last thing I want to have happen to my clients is this. I never want an ACT contact to slip through the cracks. I want to make sure, whether they're a client or a prospect, you are always staying in touch with them. And regardless of the number of people you have in ACT, whether it's 100, 1,000, 20,000, the easiest way to stay in touch with them is via email. And in ACT, you'll have a last email field. And when that last email field gets updated to today, that last email field can tell you the last time you reached someone via email. So to me, that's vital. If your goal is to make sure all your prospects get an email every 90 days, no problem. That is a great part of using ACT. So when you're starting to use ACT, you have a lot of things to think about. You've got all these things about, email. One of the considerations is, does that last email field update to make a record of what you sent to them? SwiftPage does, Constant Contact does not, MailChimp does not. I'm throwing a couple little caveats in here saying that there are some tools that can update some information, but they're awkward at best. Active Email Marketing, remember I said there, in my opinion, have some pros and cons? One of the cons, and one of the things they don't have at this point in time, is they do not have a field that will update with the last email field. You have to do it manually. I think it's a weakness of the software, but they're working on that. It's something that we've pointed out to them that we think needs to be done. So again, all of these things, you've got to figure out what's going to work best for you. If you're using ACT for the web, which this is a vision of, you can use these tools as well. Okay, so it doesn't really matter which version of ACT you're using, ACT Pro, ACT Premium. Couple little parting ideas. I recommend to my clients, if you use Microsoft Outlook, something called Banana Tag, because the question is always this: did they get the email? And that question you sometimes really need the answer to. Banana Tag, if you go to bananatag.com, is a service that works with Outlook that tells you when people got your email. Okay, I don't have a lot of time to get into it now. I told people I want to keep this brief, but that is something that you should be aware of. And again, reach out to me to discuss that in more detail. Last, about tips. When you send an email out from Microsoft Outlook, that email can be connected from Outlook to the ACT contact. So if you send an email from ACT directly, it's connected. But let's say ACT is closed and you're just working out of Outlook. Well, that email that you send from Outlook can be designed to be attached back to the ACT contact. Why does that matter? It updates the last email field and it hooks that email to the contact for future reference. But what about when a contact sends out to you an email, or I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Let's say one of your contacts sends you an email. You didn't instigate it, you didn't send it, they send it to you. What happens to that email? Well, there's a tool called Outlook Integrate R1. And what that does is many things, but one of the things it can do is take those incoming emails and attach it to the ACT contact. So if you send me an email, it will take your email and attach it to your contact in ACT. So these are some really interesting tools, and a special offer I'm making because you're here for this class is if you call me and take me up on the hour, or if you book some time with me, I'll give you a copy of the Outlook Integrate R1. So reach out to me. It's a $50 value, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind, if you want to work with me, you get an hour free if you haven't taken advantage of that. And if you want to reach me, you can call me at 781-728-9777. Or, because this class is all about email, feel free to reach me at tony@tonytheteacher.com. tony@tonytheteacher.com. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so very much for being here. I always try to keep these under 30 minutes. If you have questions, reach out to me, call me, email me, and I'd be more than happy to try to help you out. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and have a great day. Bye now.